Hello and welcome to the USAR SharePoint Users Group. Today we're going to talk about how to use and manage metadata. Your knowledge management team. I'm Tiffany Adams and I will be discussing this training event with you. Our target audience is anyone who wants to learn more about metadata. Hopefully by the end of this training, you'll have a better knowledge of what metadata is and how to implement it. And the so what is how do we prevent organizational knowledge loss and knowledge rework? How do we support the organization in order to help individuals find the information when people leave? And how do we increase search and the ability to find information? We do all of this through metadata with SharePoint. The more metadata that you use, the easier it is to search for that information, to use that handy search function in SharePoint. And the more metadata you use and the less folders you use will make it easier to find it. Our agenda for today, the different types of metadata that we're going to try to use are through choice columns, lookup columns, and manage metadata. So what is metadata? If you look on the internet, it's going to tell you data or information about information, which is pretty unclear. It's clear as mud. A better way to think about it is the information that describes or identifies that data. So if you think about an email, it's the to line, the from line, the subject, attachments, if anybody CC'd, the date it was sent, the date it was received, if it's read or unread. It's not what the email content is, but it's all the information about that email. Another way to think about metadata is if you can remember going into a library, you had a library card. That library card would tell you about a book, and each book had its own little library card. And it would have the title, the author, the copyright, where you can find it in the library, sometimes how many pages it was. It's just information about that book. It's not the book itself, it's not what's written in the book, but it's information describing the book. And that's what metadata is. It's information describing your data. Um, you've seen metadata in SharePoint. It's your column information. And those different columns that you use and the information that you provide will allow you to have multiple views based on the same data. So as you see in my image below, I've got a view of birds for my picture library, and then I have a view of just the brown animals. They're all those pictures are still in the picture library, but based on the view, I can see exactly what I want to see instead of having to sort through all of the information. So the first type of column that we're going to talk about in order you use metadata is the choice column. This is the one I always start out with because it's the easiest way to use metadata. So I'm going to say doc type choice. So create a column choice. It's probably the one that's most used because it is the easiest. Let's say if it's a reference document, if it's a brief, or if it's a report. A pro, you can have a default value set with this. I always like to leave it blank personally, but you can always have a default value in there. The choice column is ideal in the cases where you want to ensure that the data in the column is consistent. That way you can create your sort by, filter by, and your group by views and know that you're going to get the look that you're looking for. Because you have a standard that it has to choose from. It's not, well, I put reference dash policy. Well, now that's going to be another drop down. It's going to be another group by view. It's not going to sort the way I want it if I just leave it open. So if you have your choices and don't allow fill-ins, you're going to definitely get those views that you're looking for. And this is best to use at the local level. So if this is the only place that I'm going to use this information, I'm not trying to use it in multiple places. Because if I use this choice column here and I go to another list and I use it there, you're going to have to recreate it. We can always create site columns in order to get around this, but we're not going to get into site columns today. But just for the basics for choice columns, the pros is it's completely self-contained. You can't mess with it anywhere else in order to change the information. It has to be changed in this list. You can have those default values set. Choice columns can be used in calculated columns. So if it's information that you're trying to use a calculated column in order to get an end value, choice columns can be used. And users must have edit rights in order to make these changes. So it can be a pro or a con. I listed it as a pro. In this instance, maybe you only want those with the ability to add apps in order to make your metadata columns. So that is a pro. What are some of the cons? Updating the choices doesn't automatically enforce items already set. So what does that mean? If I come in here and I choose my choices, if I go back into list settings and I update my choice columns, let's say I don't want a report, I want it to say reports, let's say op order. I want it to be an op order. Well, I changed it here, but it's not going to change the information I already put in the list. It still has that old information. So if I make any changes, I'm going to have to come to each list item where that report is and change it to op order if I need to. So I would just keep that in mind. Some other cons, there's no way to stop the deletion of values already in use. So just as you saw, I changed report to op order. If I completely deleted it, it's not going to stop it. It'll no longer be a choice. It'll still be information in the list, but it doesn't stop it from not being a choice anymore. There's no hierarchical relationships. I can't say if it's a reference and then if it's a FM or an ADP or an SOP or governance. I can't have a hierarchical relationship that says reference and then those other documents. Those values can't be merged, and you can't add synonyms, and there's no auto-suggest feature. You'll see what those features can do when we talk about the managed metadata through the term store. We'll talk about that one last. Next, we're going to talk about a lookup column. This is great to use if you want to have a central metadata list. I already have an example created. So the way I do it is I create a custom list, and each column is a different metadata that I care about. It doesn't matter that blue, brief, and one are together. That has nothing to do with it. I care about the columns themselves. So each column for me is separate. So use this column field to let people choose based on the information, very similar to the choice columns. For the end user, it'll actually look the exact same. This is great if you want to maintain that metadata, such as the major commands, maybe your battalions or your divisions or branches or the ranks. Just have a central location to have all of this information. That way, when you update it here, it updates it everywhere else that this lookup column is used. This is best if you're trying to standardize metadata at the site collection or the site level. And it's a perfect starting point to see how your information is categorized. So if you eventually want to take that step to use the term store manager and manage metadata, but you're not sure where to start, using a lookup columns with these custom lists is a great place to see what your taxonomy is if you're not sure what it is yet. So this is a great informal way to start it. It's still great metadata in orders, helps you make your views in search. Excuse me. And then if you're eventually ready to start the term store manager, you can use this as a starting point. As always, there's pros and cons. So let me go ahead and go create my lookup column. So we're going to say doc type lookup. So lookup information already on the site. So yes, I have my custom list, my metadata example, and I'm going to choose the column that has the metadata that I'm talking about. So for this one, it's doc type. This is an important one. Enforce relationship behavior. I always like to say yes, because this will allow the lookup column to establish a relationship between its list items and the target items themselves in this list. Excuse me, one second. Um, and make sure that if an item is deleted, it won't let it delete in the lookup column if you're using it in our actual information that's using the metadata. It'll help make sure that if you're currently using the metadata, it can't be deleted. So that really comes into factor to make sure that your information is staying around. It doesn't support hierarchical relationships, just like the choice column. It cannot be used in calculated columns, and the values cannot be merged, and you can't add synonyms or have that auto suggest feature, just like the choice columns. Those are all features that aren't available with this type of column. But when I edit, you can see the look and feel looks pretty much just like my choice column. And if I come here and I edit, let's say report to op order, and I update my SPUG example, you're going to see it automatically updated. So that comes really in handy. So last but not least is manage metadata. I have already set up the manage metadata through the term store manager. I'll be trying to do a term store wiki page and some slides for more information later if anybody's interested. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and create my manage metadata column. You see it's an option at the bottom. And I've already created it for this example. And I'm going to use my doc type. And what's nice is I can display the entire path to the term in the field. That's that hierarchical relationship. Or I can just display the end term that I'm interested in. You can allow fill-in choices. I normally say no. And you can have a default value. This is when you have a very formal type of metadata taxonomy. You know what you're doing. You know where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. It provides the best out-of-the-box search experience if you use managed metadata. Everything is centrally located in this term store manager at the site collection level. And it can be used across all your different sites. So it comes very in handy. It has many pros and cons, again, just like everything else that we have. The user experience is a little different. You can select, but what is nice is you have the auto suggest feature. I start typing and I see it. You have the hierarchical relationships. So if I want to come into report and select, so now you see if it's reference and that relationship. So it kind of comes in handy. You can just stop. You can also just start typing in here and it'll populate with all the different information that you've got. If I was to go in the term store manager and make changes, you'll see that that information is changed as well. So if I come into my term store manager, you can also create synonyms. You can merge tags. So if I come to brief, and let's say there was another label, this is the synonyms, that maybe I don't call it a brief. It's exum, our a bub, a cub, just anything that might be a brief that I want to have that same information. You can have those synonyms created. So it starts to come very in handy. It's very flexible. You can do a lot of changes without breaking those connections. You do have that auto suggest feature. You can have the hierarchy. Uh, the default values can be set at the app level. Those searching and tagging synonyms help you make sure that that one term is getting used, even though multiple people might call it other things. Uh, some cons, if you're using SharePoint Designer in order to send emails, the managed metadata does not display. You cannot use them in calculated columns. You do require some careful planning and creation for the taxonomy and structure. You really need to know how you're going to structure your information and your metadata in order to use the term store manager. It requires training staff in order to use the term store manager. And additionally, it's either going to be all done by your site collection administrator, or your site collection administrator has to give another person the permissions in order to manage the metadata. So that's a few pros and cons, and those are 3 different ways that you can use and manage the different metadata that you have across your organization. One last handy tool about metadata is metadata navigation. Every list and library can have metadata navigation. It's configured at the app level, and it's a tree control. It will show up under your quick launch, and it lets you filter your information based on your different columns or a kind of like a little search. This came really in handy when our search was not working or our data was not getting crawled. The first step is to configure your metadata. Well, we've done that. Step 2 is for site owners. They have to make sure that the metadata navigation site feature is activated. It is not automatically activated. So for site owners, you need to go to Site Settings, Manage Site Features, and ensure your metadata navigation, right here, is activated. If it's not activated, you're not going to be able to use this. Once it's activated, you can go to your lists and libraries and configure it. So we can go to List Settings, and you're going to see Metadata Navigation Settings. This is when you click on it and you decide what hierarchy fields do you want. You do need to notice that the lookup column is not one of the ones that you can select. So another con to lookup columns. And then you can configure key filters. So we've got our navigation type, and then we've got our key filters. Maybe who it was created by, when it was created, and you can throw that different information in there. Now when we go to our list, you're going to see that metadata navigation right here underneath our quick launch. Here's the navigation itself. If I just wanted to see the briefs, it'll just automatically filter that for me without having to create a view. So if you don't want to have to create multiple views, you want to have it filter based off of this navigation, you can do that. And you can do it off of your choice columns or your metadata columns. And then you also have a way to filter it off of certain information. So maybe if it was created after a certain date, and it'll help filter that information for you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to the USAR KM team through our group box or our KM support tickets. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day.